Beletahunter Productions Publishing. Book Club Recommendations and Excerpt Reading. Today's agenda will include a brief welcome, an agenda description of the platform, a presentation of the book title, a brief description of the book's genre, the book description, an excerpt reading from the author, a summary, Q&A wrap-up. Welcome to Beletahunter Productions Publishing. My name is Tanya Hunter. I'm the one facilitating this learning today, as well as the one reading the excerpts. I hope that you enjoy this presentation. Thank you. I routinely make book recommendations for reading. I always like to recommend the books that I've written for you to read. However, I often do other books as well. But for this platform today, it will be a book that I have written. I will do an excerpt reading from the book. I will give you the title and description for that book, as well as your options for purchasing the book if you care to do so. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Today's title is When Shit Hits the Fan, a disaster planning and preparedness handbook. This is a paperback edition. It was published June 30th, 2016, written by Tanya Hunter. This book is a work of nonfiction as well as a self-help manual. This is written as a guide to your common sense and as a suggestion to what may be necessary to survive during a disaster. I was using my past healthcare as well as former military training to come up with this emergency preparedness handbook. This book is a part of the Disaster Series publication. When the shit hits the fan. I've always been the type of person that did things that I did, not necessarily because I had to, but did them just because I wanted to. And that was my answer for everything. Whenever people would ask me why I did something, my answer was always because I wanted to. So that's the answer I gave for joining the U.S. Navy. I was relatively young when I embarked on, or should I say, explored on a career in the U.S. Naval Reserves. I learned a lot, and I mean a whole lot. It was still amazing to me how much I learned and how much more I still had to learn and how much that far surpassed the knowledge that my current colleagues possess with all their whatever. One of the things that sticks with me the most is the survival aspect. They told us as well as showed us that if we were ever thrown overboard, that we should use our bell-bottom dungarees as a flotation device. Yep, the bell-bottom fly was easy to remove and with one hand. You are supposed to pull it off, tie them at the bottom, flap some air in them, and voila. And it actually worked. That coupled with my wild imagination, it was soon realized that my entire uniform could be used to serve so many purposes. There were so many things that I could get out of this uniform: a tourniquet, a weapon, handkerchief, and another nice survival tip that they shared with us. And I say nice very loosely because I am not going to do that under any circumstances. And that was if we were to get seasick, we should save our vomit and eat it back later. Okay, excuse me while I go and vomit right now. That is gross. So, what is preparedness? Preparedness, by definition, is to be prepared and ready. Ready for what? Anything that happens when it happens. When one thinks of preparedness, one thinks of something that you have done or a plan that you have made to ensure that you can survive a situation or anything that comes, if or should I say when it happens. These actions are referred to as a plan of action or preparedness, and it helps avoid being blindsided by events and avoid having to suffer unnecessary consequences. Preparedness is something that an individual can do to ensure that he or she is ready. It can be done as a small group, such as a family, and it can be done as a large group, such as a neighborhood or an entire community. Some people do not even fully understand what preparedness means. Therefore, they do not think they are prepared, or they may think that they are prepared. Well, while others that they are not prepared but does not know what to do or where to start. Some people have never experienced a disaster and cannot even tell you what a disaster is. A disaster, by definition, is an unforeseen or predicted event that can occur suddenly or gradually. This event can cause displacement, loss, or damages. It seriously disrupts the normal routine of everyday life. There are several types of disasters. Some are natural disasters and some are man-made disasters. A man-made disaster is something that is caused by a human being. It can be accidental, neglect, or intentional. These can include things such as oil spills, fires, chemical plant explosion, terrorism, contaminants or pollutants, chemical warfare, and diseases. Blackouts and power outages, stampedes and riots, or internet hacking are also examples of man-made disasters. A natural disasters are disasters that occur at no fault or neglect of man. It occurs as a result of the earth or environmental factors. These events can be sudden and can cause loss of economic and loss of life. Such things as snowstorms, blizzards, earthquakes, fires started by lightning or during an electric storm, wildfires started by lightning or drought, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, landslides, mudslides, volcanoes, and droughts. There are so many natural disasters. We all think of earthquakes, tornadoes, and blizzards, but do we rarely think about avalanches, asteroids, solar flares, and gamma ray bursts? I do not even know what a gamma ray burst is. So, guess what? I had to look it up. A gamma ray burst is so far from the Earth that it causes us no harm. However, things can change as we all know. So I guess it is best to be prepared for whatever. Gamma ray bursts are high energetic explosion outside of the Milky Way. They are seen by satellites by astronomers. Other natural disasters are thunderstorms, volcanoes, floods, landslides, tsunamis, and heat waves. There are disasters that people argue that are man-made and others argue that is of nature, such as food shortages and droughts and other climate changes. Others argue that man's behavior causes the earth to become angry and that the heavens wreak havoc on us because of our sins. Regardless of the reason, everyone should be prepared. Proper preparation will not stop the event from occurring, but knowing what to do during a disaster can help ease the pain of the event, mitigate the damages, and hopefully reduce loss and damages. Being prepared helps eases anxiety and fears. Everyone needs to be prepared. So, how do you do it? First, find out what you really already know and what you have already have in place. Do an assessment of your knowledge and an assessment of your resources. Know your area's evacuation routes. Have a map, a real paper map, not an electronic GPS just in case the towers are out. Know what disasters can occur in your area by knowing what disasters have occurred in your area in the past. If you know that your area is prone to flooding, then you will need a disaster preparedness plan that includes what to do during a flood. Know what disasters can occur in your area by knowing the possibilities, even if the disaster has not previously occurred in your immediate area, but have occurred in areas similar to yours. So look around to see if you live in an area near the coast. Are you in a path of a hurricane? Are you in a hurricane zone? Know where the earthquake's fault lines are. Different disasters may require a different kind of planning. Planning for a snowstorm is different from planning for a chemical spill. Know your area's evacuation routes. A quick note and an easy way to tell that a road is an evacuation route, other than the big signs that say this is an emergency evacuation route, is that those streets and roads are usually the ones that are plowed first after a blizzard or snowstorm. Otherwise, you can probably ask your local police department for information on evacuation routes. Then, of course, understand that anything can happen at any time that can cause a displacement or otherwise normal functionality. Do not depend on others to have a plan for you. Their plan may not fit your situation. For instance, your employer may have a disaster emergency preparedness plan, but it may be exclusive to employees and what they should do if they are at work when the disaster occurs. The evacuation plan may be limited to that building or that neighborhood and will not be of much help to you telling you how to evacuate your home or your particular neighborhood. After you realize what disasters are possible in your area, stay alert and post it to your local news and have an alert system placed on your phone that can alert you to possible dangers. You may want to understand the warning signs of certain events for yourself, just in case that the news reporters are falling short or are unavailable. Know what signs go with what disaster and understand the risks that may accompany them. You may be the first one to see a disaster, and it's up to you to report it to others and know what to do, especially if it's a man made disaster. The disaster may even be caused by you, like accidentally spilling something toxic, and therefore you should be the first to have to alert others. So know the signs and the risk. Have more than one disaster kit. Yes, that is what I said. Why? Because you do not know where you are going to be when the disaster hits. You may not be home or near your home or able to get to your disaster kit. You may not be able to get to or retrieve your emergency kit. So it's a nice idea to have one in your car or one at work or one on your person at all times. I don't mean walk around with a big backpack everywhere you go, but have a simple essentials such as emergency numbers, a quick snack, first aid kit, and some water. After you make your kit, check it. Check it every once in a while to make sure that the batteries are not gone dead or that the food is airtight and remains fresh. One way to keep food fresh is to place it in metal containers. A special section I want to just touch on is one that I can relate to. I grew up in the country and we always had food. I did not like the food and didn't want to eat it, but we always had it nonetheless. One reason we always had food was because 90% of our food was grown by us. It was grown in our gardens and then canned or freeze. So if you, for some strange reason that the grocery stores decide to cease to exist, we will still be eating forever. Well, this made me think when I was writing this book about disaster planning. I talked about hurricanes, snowstorms, earthquakes, blah, blah, blah. But what about something as simple as a food shortage? Well, won't be so simple if it actually happened, right? But forget all that. Forget about the floods and the tornadoes, the forest fires, and just think for a moment. What if there is a huge food contamination and the grocery stores in your area is forced to close until the contamination is cleared? Where will you and your family get food from? How will you eat? So it dawned on me the importance of maybe knowing how to grow your own food. You don't have to have some elaborate fancy show-stopping garden. Just a few plants and a few seeds. Side effect, you will lose some weight and your kidneys won't have to work overtime processing all that animal protein. I do not need to look at statistics, numbers, or charts, nor do I need to take a survey to know that the majority of the people, well, at least in the city where I live, are not prepared for disasters, real, imaginary, long, or short. Know how I know this? because every time there's a hint of a hurricane or a snowstorm, there's a mad rush to the grocery store, clearing off every shelf. There is not a breadcrumb, strip of toilet paper, or drop of water left. Seeing this saddens me for several reasons. I am saddened because I am surrounded by people who lack insight and have a tendency to panic and overreact when things are slightly bad. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? What is it going to be like when the shit really hits the fan? There are experts, conspiracy theorists, and fearmongers who predict that a major disaster is coming and it is going to last for longer than a weekend. They are actually predicting a world changing event that is going to change the course of this nation forever. At a minimum, they are suggesting having enough food and supplies for your family to last at least a couple of years. Are you kidding me? A couple of years? So, how do you prepare for this? How do we prepare for this so called apocalypse? What do we do? What do we need to do? How much toilet tissue and milk do I need to store up? Well, there is such much more to a disaster plan than just having a few items in a backpack. Disaster planning is a mindset. You need to always be thinking and have a plan of what to do when. I do not mean to live in fear, but I mean to be aware of your surroundings and know what to do in case of an emergency. I always tell my diabetic patients to make sure that they take a snack with them when they are away or going to be away from the house for a significant amount of time and the possibility of missing a meal is evident. The reason I tell them this is so that they are not caught without food or having something sweet to eat or to put in their mouths if their blood sugar drops. I tell my asthmatic patients to make sure that they have their inhalers with them just in case they go into an asthma attack. These things are called having an action plan. This advice is good advice for everyone on the planet. Everyone needs to have an action plan. Everyone needs to have an action plan for if the situation arises. So, do you have a spare tire or a can of fix-a-flat or emergency roadside assistance? Of course you do. Why? Because you understand that there's a possibility that you could have a flat tire. You don't drive in fear, but you are prepared for the unlikely event anyway. Well, that is what you should do when you think of being prepared for a disaster. Okay, so let's get back to the mindset of being vigilant and prepared. There should be a preparation of your mind for a disaster. You should seek spiritual counseling or guidance so you can calmly handle when the event strikes. It is going to be difficult enough having to deal with this, but when you add panic to the situation, it makes it worse. I have a three-word phrase that I say when I want to relax and calm myself. These three words are totally unrelated to each other, and they do not stand for anything. I just was upset one day and wanted to calm down and started shouting out random stuff. I decided that I was going to adopt that as one of my coping mechanisms, and it has worked. There are studies that suggest that there are indeed words that have proven to calm the nerves. As a matter of fact, do you remember in school, in the music class, they taught us to say do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Well, there's a college study that shows that singing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do to have calming effects and has even lowered blood pressures. You do not have to break out in song during a disaster because I do not want someone to think that you're nuts. But you can come up with your own thing to calm your nerves because believe me, you are going to need it. Like I said, judging by how people raid the grocery stores 2 days prior to a forecast of a storm is any indication of what kind of irrational people there are, then you are going to need all the common methods you can find. Questions and answering segment. Of course, the first question is always, why did you write this book? Well, boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I wrote this book because I wanted people to be prepared. I had no idea when I wrote this book back in 2015. The book wasn't published until 2016. What was going to happen in 2020? I had no idea when I wrote this book. And now when I go back and read it, it is so amazing to me the things that I said in this book that is so relevant to what we are going through right now. And I am so amazed. I'm like, oh my God, it is almost like I knew, but I didn't know. But it was almost like I was predicting because everything that I wrote in this book pretty much happened. And this still blows my mind, even though I was the one who wrote the book. So I've always been a person that has been prepared. I'm not extreme like some people. So there are some people that have food stored up 20, 30, 40 years. I'm not that extreme. And I'm not the other spectrum either, the other end of the spectrum where people just don't care, they live day by day. So I'm somewhere in the middle. But I do agree that you should be prepared at least for a little while. You don't have to go out and buy a year's worth of stuff, but at least have something for your family that if there is a disaster, have something for a couple of days that can get you through until you can figure out what you're going to do next. So I wrote this book because I've always been a prepared person. I don't like seeing people panic. I don't like it when they say it's going to snow and then I go in the grocery store and people have bought everything. That always bothered me. So I said, well, let me write a book. Maybe somebody will read it and get some ideas of how they can prepare. And that goes into the next question of who is the intended reader. The intended reader of this book is someone who really is interested in being prepared. But in light of what just happened recently, within the last year, 2020, 2021, I guess people are going to say, well, we don't need to read the book now because we have all experienced it and we can write our own book about what we have gone through. But I still think that someone should at least read this book because it has other things in it too, other ideas and suggestions that different disasters that I list that can happen that's different than the recent disaster that we have experienced. Okay, so this book is available Kindle, print version, paperback, and it can be purchased wherever you buy your books. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this reading by the author. I hope that you appreciate it and find the information helpful. Again, you can look up the author by name, Tanya Hunter. You can look up the book by title anywhere that you purchase your books. You can find them on Amazon.com. Thank you.